for food safety, like how many bacteria are in this food and how does that work out. So the interest of nutrition kind of came about because I guess I call myself an athlete, not really, 5K races, things like that. But through working out, running, and understanding how food is directly connected, even though that wasn't really in my world the mainstream thought. Food was just something you ate, and that's just the way it worked out. But I guess through the pivotal moments for me getting interested in nutrition through experiential learning, more even so than academic learning, was at 17. I learned how clean eating just turned my energy around in 24 hours. And for someone in their formative years, that's kind of when you have it right in your face, that becomes real to you. It's not something you read in a book. It's your food directly connected to how you felt as a person. And that was really telling. I guess the second thing was when I galloped racehorses for a living, you had to be light or you get hurt. The horses were, you had to have fast reflexes. And so through having to fast to keep your weight down and understanding how much energy you had, increased energy and reflexes, that was another real learning moment where it was right, just experiential. And then the last one was my fabulous 40s. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Others might not have been not there yet. But when the female endocrine system hits some of the troubles that we develop in life, you kind of pick a path. You pick a path where you're going to do some life changes and some real questioning and discipline, or you're going to go down another road. And I guess that can vary greatly. But I chose trying to deal with it through food and learning that, sugar and some other questionable substances probably wasn't the best way to go. But that all brought me in really reading as much as I could on nutrition and finding out what's going on. And the last 6 months have been telling because I taught a nutrition class last semester at College of Central Florida where I work. I teach mostly biology, but I do teach some other life science classes. And I had to update the book. It was a 2019 edition, but it had citations only as current as 2009. I thought that odd. And I started digging into some of the material and found some things that kind of woke me up to some facts that I thought I had known. And I guess that all changes because nutritional research, you probably, the whole thing, which is a link on the slide I have right now, which hopefully we can make that available to you. I don't have the time to click on all the links. I just want to make sure that you have all the research that I'm going to talk about, that you can look at it if you want to. So the whole thing about eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you, it goes back and forth like a ping pong ball. And absolutely, I'm just going to come right up front. Some people do disclosures. I just tell you, nutritional research is tough because you can't lock people in a cage. It's just not what you do. So if you're going to do a random control trial and you're going to ascribe these people all these diets, how do you know they're not cheating? You want to think, oh, they're doing the right thing. But since I think the last really strong random control trials when they had state hospitals, and that's been I don't even remember the decade, where they could use people to do these diets on, and then they knew they weren't doing something they shouldn't be doing, and the data was direct. So I am right up front. Nutritional research is questionable because it's very hard to do a random control trial. And so you have a lot of data and meta-analysis of data, like the Framingham Heart Study in Massachusetts and the Bogalusa Heart Study in Louisiana that's ongoing. And they are revealing a lot of data that's kind of troubling at this point. But we'll talk about that later. Hopefully this will, is that going forward? There it goes. So here are just some statistics I've tried to use. I don't know if you're aware of this. The USDA brought out the 2020-2025, that's a mouthful, 2020-2025 dietary guidelines this past December. And there's some improvements and there's some things that are still scary on them. And I still think there's things to work out, but I'm going to bring those up and have links for those if you want to access those. These are some statistics right here, but I'll probably finish tonight with stats, but just trying to put some framework behind, the connection of our food and what's going on. And you can see I mean, what is there, like 330 million people or something like that in America, and a third of us have one chronic illness. And this is from the USDA. And then you look at the cost of healthcare because of the choices we make. And it's sad to think that, but we all don't always make the best choices. So let's just, be honest with that. And then there is a lot of confusion with what we should eat. And then the trust issues with, is this research done right? You keep changing your mind kind of thing. So, in their defense, I agree with that. I think there's a lot to be said, and a little bit of transparency would help. So the first class, I'm just going to talk about what are the dietary issues, working from cells all the way up to the statistics of why we should care. And then the second class, it'll be more, questions from you all if you have them, and what can we do about them. I have some simple solutions that, well, self-discipline is not that simple, let's be honest, but things you can squeeze in even to a busy family that will be workable. I don't have kids, that's my caveat, so I say that kind of like off the cuff, because kids are difficult. They don't see the ramifications and they think right now. So that can be kind of tough unless they have some kind of food allergy. Then that makes them pay attention. And as much as food allergies are troubling, they're sometimes a blessing, because then now you have to pay attention. So that can be kind of twofold. So this is what I would like to get through tonight. Just looking at, sometimes it helps you have a cognitive understanding of why you can't have what you want, then you're more willing to abide in that. Then macros, you hear a lot about macros. Oh, I count my macros. What does that mean? And does it necessarily lead to nutrition? That's another thing. And then homeostasis, that's what doctors are checking for when they pull your blood and they do all these vital signs. And so if homeostasis, which means the same place, so is your blood chemistry, is it right in the margin of healthy or is it not? And vital signs like blood pressure. So homeostasis is what our cells in our body are struggling with our lifestyles to keep within this threshold. And if they fall outside of whatever threshold your doctor might discuss with you, it can be serious, maybe not so serious, but over time that can add up. And then the statistics part. I tried to keep it short, tried to keep it straightforward, but there's a lot of scary statistics, so much that financial institutions are paying attention to our healthcare system now. And that's kind of weird, but they're market analysts, so they see the numbers changing, and it's causing a little bit of concern, even to coin new terms actually in science through this. So this is one thing I hope you'll do, because I'd like to just get input. If not, I have some of my own labels that I used to think of food items being healthy, but typing that into the chat, I can download the chat, I guess, or somebody can and send it to me, and then I can look into some of these things. But it's a real eye opener and I keep having these. I have a master's degree in this field, and I keep going, getting an item from the grocery store and saying, wait a second, wait, that's only 1/3 fish? What are you talking about? It says fish, So if you're not really careful anymore, the grocery store can be a landmine. And I'd like to bring that to light. And the best way to do that is something that that you eat, having that as an eye opener. Hopefully it won't be, but just in case, that might be a learning experience. So I welcome that. So we'll get into why do we eat? And it's funny talking to a whole group of 18 and 19-year-olds. They're like, well, you eat it because it tastes good. You eat it because that's what you want to eat. It's what you want. And ultimately, we're trying to feed cells. So the average person, not me, I'm borderline midget, so 40 trillion cells makes up a normal human being. And that's ultimately what we're trying to keep healthy by what we eat. And most of us don't think that way. I'm included. I'm a total hypocrite in all this. So I'm not telling you, I'm hearing myself as well. So you're trying to feed your cells, and your cells don't really want what you think is tasty. And sometimes we reap those consequences, and we want to blame it on something else. But let's be honest, it's what we ate. It's what we drank. But if you keep that in mind as we work through this, trying to make a balance, make your cells happy, make your taste buds happy, and live long and prosper, I guess. So here's what I'm talking about. you can see, pointer will work, you can see it here. This is supposed to be a capillary, the smallest vessel in the body. And it's showing you blood flowing through the capillary, bringing nutrients. That's a very small, superficial diagram that it's not inclusive at all. And it's showing you the oxygen diffusing into your cells for cellular respiration and glucose for cellular respiration, but there's amino acids, there's all these other things. And then the cells are also, giving up their garbage. They're throwing their waste back in the blood to be cleaned by the lymph and all this. And so there's a whole distribution center going on. There's nutrients and groceries being delivered, and then there's waste products being carried away. And that's one reason, just to kind of use this as a teachable moment, why blood pressure is so important. If it's too high, these areas can get overloaded. And you only hear this when people's eyesight goes, or their nephrons and their kidneys go. But these capillary beds are everywhere. And if these capillary beds don't have that right threshold of blood pressure, then it's not good. Too little gets in or too little gets out, and waste products can be an issue. But you're ultimately trying to feed these 100 trillion little guys that they don't care about what you care about. They just want to get the molecules they need. And they have really funny ways of showing it when they don't get what they need. And it doesn't always become apparent that it's your diet. And that's problematic. So this is just a GIF. It's lame, I know, but it's trying to show you, from people that, don't look at this stuff, it's showing you this supposed nutrient-rich blood flowing in, where the diffusion of all these nutrients can go into your cells, and then the waste products being taken out. So that can be from the digestive system delivering food, or the lungs delivering oxygen, or then back to the lungs or back to the waste cycle, like your kidneys. So that's just the cells taking in the food items, which we're going to get to in a second, and then the waste products being taken away. That's one reason why kidney disease is so terrible, because the kidneys don't just make urine, they chemically stabilize you. And dialysis is a pretty rudimentary way of handling it, but that's all we got at the moment. So take care of your kidneys. Please, please, please take care of them. Stop drinking soda. I'm going to try not to do that a lot through this thing, but they are sensitive, and it's something you want to always have. So macros on a food label, when people say they're counting macros, this is what they're talking about. So you have lipids that break down to fatty acids through digestion, and I'll go into this a little bit more. You have proteins that break down to, some of you might be guessing this, amino acids, which you can buy at Publix. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can buy amino acids and take them if you think your feed isn't balanced, but that just means you probably should look at your diet. That's all I'm saying. And carbs get a little bit complicated. This is where I've heard some of the most craziest stuff, and I've said the craziest stuff, so I'm not picking on anybody. But when people talk about no carb diets, I just want to, if you understand carbs and you say no carb diet, that can be helpful. If you don't understand carbs, you can stop eating salad, which is terrible. Those are the carbs you want to eat. So there's 3 types of carbs. Cellulose is the one you want. That's the insoluble fiber that you want. If you eat cellulose, you could eat all day long. Just like a horse out grazing in a field. And you actually can get a lot of protein from plants. Calorie per calorie is the same as meat. I know. We'll get to that right now. And then starch is our problem. It's one of our big problems right now, is we're getting a lot of starch, but we took out the fiber. And so starch, I heard this great quote from a physician. He says, you don't understand, starch is the metabolic equivalent of sugar. So he said, let me put it to you this way. Take a bowl of cornflakes and put a tablespoon of sugar on the cornflakes. That's the metabolic equivalent of a bowl of sugar and a tablespoon of cornflakes. And I rolled my eyes and went, whatever. And then I read a little bit more and said, oh, he's right. But it would take 5 more minutes. But the starch in those cornflakes are going to become sugar, and they're going to spike your glucose, and then they're going to spike your insulin, and then they're going to cause that homeostasis that you're striving for to fall apart. And it's that, and the chronic use of these foods without fiber is one of the issues. Glycogen is a carbohydrate, and that's how we store it. So if you hear of athletes, I'm going to carbo load, which nobody ever needs to do unless you're running marathons, and fast, really fast. Glycogen is in the liver and the muscles. And last time I think it's like 1,100, 1,200 calories of glycogen. So you can't store that much of it. And I'm going to talk about the dual fuel tank system, which is great. I got that 2 years ago and I thought, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So cellulose is the one you want. That's fiber. It's a fancy name for fiber. Starch is the one that we have a problem with if you eat it without fiber. And glycogen, don't worry about, that's in animals. You don't eat meat to get glycogen. And ultimately, on a food label, hopefully you're reading food labels, all of these total up your calories. And we're going to look at some food labels in a little bit. So these are the carbs. We're going to do carbs, then proteins and fats, I think in that order. There's nothing to get with the chemistry here. It's just that you see the fiber first, and that is the prebiotic. I'm going to go into prebiotics and probiotics if I have time. That's the one that's going to make it all the way through your digestive system into your large intestine and feed your microbiome, which is exactly what you want. You want the fiber to get in there and take care of all the microbes that are going to actually make nutrients for you. That's the gold standard. The starch, it's great. It gives you calories, but if you're eating the starch without fiber, there's the problem. And sugar, it's not in nature. I mean, you have to climb a tree and get stung by bees to get sugar. So we're getting this overload of sugar in concentrated amounts, and we're eating it pretty much all day long because these adult candy bars called health protein bars, they're so full of sugar, it's spiking your glucose and insulin. So, reading labels and trying to keep that out of your diet is what I'm very impressed. Even the USDA is now recommending this. I'm like, wow, you guys are coming a long way. And then you can see here, this is the glycogen. It gets stored in the liver and the muscles. And ultimately, if you don't use your carbs, they're going to become fat. And then the fat has to be burned a whole different way. I don't know if we'll get to that. And ultimately, this is the one you want. And then that will become the microbiome feeder in the large intestine. And that's the goal. If it gets broken down and absorbed in the small intestine, it can't feed the microbes. And when these microbes in your large intestine go hungry, they can starve the good ones and the bad ones can take over. And right now they're causing autoimmune disorders that we've not seen before. So there's a lot going on right now that they don't want to make any statements on it because it's like, well, what is this going on? But you'll find Western medicine is starting to embrace this a little bit more. It's encouraging. So here's a little bit more about what we're doing to our food supply. This is a typical grain, and you can see the endosperm is what we're eating. And you see starchy carbohydrate with some protein and vitamins. But look at what we're taking out, the bran and the germ. That's where all the good stuff is. And then we feed that to the cows and pigs, and we eat the starch. And for some of you that are gluten intolerant, you might know the endosperm, the part that we're getting too much of in our diet, is where the gluten is. So it's kind of it's just snowballing. And then third thing I've heard, and I'm just the messenger here, these are experts that I'm getting this from, that the other issue is we're eating pretty much corn, soy, and wheat. And the other problematic issue is that they're the same species. And so if, not go into the potato famine, having that all wiped out, I don't really fear that as much as I fear the fact that you need this variety, you need this genetic diversity, because we're finding that the large intestine is so full of these extra genes from these microbes. Part of that is making up our health. And if you're only feeding the same corn, soy, and wheat, then you're starting to starve out and lower that diversity. I saw some statistic where it's like an indigenous tribe will have 4,000, I don't even know how they counted them, because how can you look for what you don't know you're looking for? Anyway, 4,000 different bacterial specimens in the large intestine of an indigenous person, and the typical American is 1,200. And after one course of antibiotics, you're wiped out to 100. And that's just scary. But we're still trying to learn, what does that really mean? So what are the, we know some problems this comes up with, but, we're still in the beginning phases of learning what the ultimate consequences of that are. So for those of you who don't know about milling, this is the flow chart. So you have the whole grain, and some of you probably, I'm sure you might do this at home. You take your oatmeal or your barley or something and mill it right in your house. You can do it with a coffee grinder. And then you get the flour. And then if you go one step further, you get like cornstarch. And that's ultimately, you're taking out all that good stuff, and then you're eating pure starch. And that When you eat that, that instantly becomes glucose, sugar, and then spikes insulin. And there's kind of an issue. This is a diagram I think might be helpful for some of you. Any kind of carbs, you see the bread, hopefully you can see that, so small. And then the pasta and pizza, the cheese wouldn't really count. I just saw something the other day where just putting fat on, and it's supposed to be a healthy fat, but oh well, on a baked potato with skin reduces the glucose spike by 50%. I was floored by that. I haven't tested myself with this yet, but I'm going to, because I'm crazy like that. But we're just speaking about the carbs themselves, like the pasta and the bread and the dough, the pizza, and now the tomato sauce, which is full of sugar, unfortunately. So the glucose gets into the blood, then the pancreas is stimulated, and then you have the insulin release. And insulin's good. You want insulin. A true diabetic, someone who's type 1 diabetic, if they don't get insulin, they starve to death. Type 2 diabetics, that's a whole nother thing. It's technically hyperinsulinemia. And yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. But insulin is necessary to feed your cells. The cells are sitting there like baby chicks wanting food. And unless that insulin is there allowing the food, the digested molecules to get into your cells, they can't get in. And that's a good thing, because if the molecules can just enter your cells willy-nilly, they can cause all sorts of metabolic mishaps. Ultimately, then you have, if you have the glucose now delivered, it'll be into the muscle, the liver, and muscle is great, because the more muscle you have and the more active it is and the more mitochondria, the muscle can take in glucose without insulin. So that's great, because it can go just directly in. You don't even need an insulin spike. And if your body's used to that, you don't get it. And the insulin can be problematic if it stays high. And ultimately, the end result is homeostasis is met. So, you ate the carbs, the sugar went up, the insulin was released, and then the sugar came back down. So homeostasis was maintained. And the biggest issue with pre-diabetics and type 2 diabetes is that it's always elevated. The glucose is always elevated, the insulin is always elevated, and that abrades the inside of the cardiovascular system and leads to coronary artery disease and all these other mishaps that are plaguing our society right now. Man, I'm just so full of good information. So these are the proteins, and a lot of fancy words on here, but it's just like you eat the protein. It can be plants or animals. And someone can look this up, but calorie per calorie, broccoli has as much protein, calorie per calorie, as a pork chop. And I was always under the impression that you had to eat animal products to get good, solid protein. Well, I learned something. No, you don't. But you have to eat all day long, and that can get really boring. To get that much, vegetables in you, especially green vegetables, that's a lot of chewing. So you digest these proteins down into these amino acids. And there's 20, if you want to get really picky, 21 amino acids that you're made of. And they're all in different varieties that make up your muscles, your all parts of your body, enzymes that carry out metabolism, immune cells, which we're hearing a lot about now, and your hair, your skin, your nails, things like that. So you eat proteins for that. And it can be problematic if you're not getting a lot of protein, though typically in the American diet, that's not a problem. And here are the lipids, and you see them on a food label as fats. Lipids is the technical word. And you can see this image. This is just a cross-section of a cell structure, and you can see the phospholipid bilayer. This is what allows things in and out of the cell. Like, for instance, this protein here, this orange globular thing, the insulin would land on one of these little receptors and then open that, and then the glucose can move in. So it's just important to know how the cells can maintain their unique, environment. So a muscle cell is going to need different molecules at a different ratio than a nerve cell, than a skin cell. So they need to be able to keep that kind of unique pattern, and this is how they do it. This is one way. But you see cholesterols. That's a fat. Glycolipid, that's a fat and a carbohydrate. Phospholipid, that's a fat. So your structures and your cells are made out of the food you eat. And you can see a lot of these here. So you eat the plants and animals, hopefully healthy ones. And then through bile, which I think you've heard of, gallbladder, right? The bile is made in the liver from recycled red blood cells. That's so cool, so efficient. And then that makes bile. And then that's stored in the gallbladder for us gluttons that want to eat the whole cheesecake. And then boom, that thing's flushed into the small intestine to take care of it so you don't get irritable bowel syndrome. So bile and lipase, actually, no, I have them in the right order. Bile has to work on the fat first, and then lipase can get an active end of that molecule to break it down into fatty acids. And you'll probably see SFAs a lot now because they're starting to put it on labels to try to, you know, con you into buying their health product. Short chain fatty acids are the big health term right now. But you want to be getting short chain fatty acids from good food sources, not supplements, but I won't go into that. So you're going to digest the lipids down into their smallest component, which are fatty acids, and this is what they make up. Some of my students get so amazed that they think of cholesterol, because everything in media is cholesterol is bad. You want to keep cholesterol down, all this stuff. Cholesterol is the precursor for testosterone, which is the precursor for estrogen. I mean, it's kind of important. And this is one of the first things that men start notice as they, we won't go into any details, but men start notice as they get older when they start having these homeostasis issues. Because if you're taking a statin and that's lowering your cholesterol, well, you know, things aren't going to be that great. So, but cholesterol is a precursor for all steroid hormones. And my students are shocked by that. So like, well, cholesterol is just this old person thing that you have to be careful about. I'm like, no, cholesterol is like all your sex hormones, people, come on. So, and then the cell structures themselves. So dietary lipids from healthy sources are so crucial. And I'm having to struggle with that now that I've changed my diet. So I'm grinding flaxseed. I can't believe I'm saying that. Grinding flaxseed for my omega-3s and eating walnuts. Not because I want them, but because I should have them. But you want that 3 to 6 balance. Now, what we're getting a lot of is 6. And the problem that gets problematic if you don't have enough 3. So 3 is the one where you get from some really good plant sources, but you can get it from fish. Well, you want to be careful what source that comes from. God, I could talk about this all day. I'm sorry. So you can see the cholesterol and the phospholipids. So these are just some structures that lipids make up what you are, what your body is made of. So we'll go into macros from what we're typically used to seeing them as, not scientific diagrams or food labels, but I want to see my food. So you can see these 2 meals. This is from a dietary professor at Penn State. And what do you think the calories of each are? And I don't know if we can have people kind of guesstimate calories where I can hear you or not, but do you think they're equal? Do you think one's more than the other? I'm probably setting you up, aren't I? So these meals, believe it or not, are relatively equal in calories, and look at the difference. And that's one of the things I'm finding that registered dietitians and nutritionists are trying to get across. You get to eat 3 times as much food if you choose properly, as opposed to what some of us eat and some of us want to eat better, but we're in a hurry, we're stressed, and when you're stressed, you don't have dopamine, so you crave the junk. So that's a whole nother conversation. But these images are the same. Technically, they talk about calorie poor, nutrient rich, or they'll say it high energy density or low energy density. The other thing you see on the slide is kilocalories. That's the same as seeing on the label the big C. The big C is kilocalories. If you saw your calories written out as they are in small c, it would just be kind of weird. So they use the kilocalorie unit of measurement. But that kind of gives you an eye opener of, you know, making better choices. Not only is it the nutrition, but it's the volume you get to eat. It's a win-win. So here is an item. I thought, well, let's go to some food labels. This is an item I brought up with the chemistry professor at the CF, and he still goes, we were just talking about it today at work. He's like, I still can't believe that. He said, do you know that went all the way back to the 70s, which I didn't know. But just to give you some idea how to scan a label, because if you're going to continue to buy labeled products, and now they label carrots, so let's be honest, everything has a label now. But you want to be able to do a quick check and understand, you know, what are you really being sold and what are you being offered? Because I have a master's degree and I'm still getting duped. So you really need to read the label. Don't make any assumptions because they're sneaky. They are just sneaky. So I don't know if you can see what this product is. Some of you might already notice this or have noticed it. This is tomato soup. So you can right away look at the second ingredient, which floored me because I heard these researchers going on about how bad tomato soup is. And I'm like, these cracker jacks, they're not, what are they talking about? Tomato soup's good for you. And I went and got one off the pantry shelf and started laughing. I said, oh my gosh. And so to do the math on this, the easiest way to do it is just use the total calories of a serving size. So, but you have to know a few things first. Carbohydrates are typically 4 calories per gram. Fat is double. Fat is 9 calories per gram. That was a whole fat-free diet nonsense that probably hurt a lot of people, but, and then the protein is 4 calories a gram. They've done the math for you to give you the total. Sometimes I even check that, but they're usually right on. They can't get away with it. And so I'm going to say, okay, can you calculate? Because the two important things are fiber and sugar. That's where they're sneaking it into us and where we need to be careful. So the percent fiber on this, so if you look at the fiber, it says 2 grams, right? So technically, you multiply the 2 by 4 and you get 8. You can probably do that in your head about approximately how much percentage that is right now. But it's the fiber calories divided by the total calories. And I've just short linked this math. So you do the division, you get a decimal, you multiply by 100. I didn't go down the whole road. And you get 9% fiber. And now the sugar was my eye opener. You probably already saw it, but I'm slow. So sugar is 12 grams of sugars, 8 added, like I guess tomato soup tastes that terrible. So 12 times 4 is 48, and you divide that by the total calories. So tomato soup is 53% sugar. Congratulations. You just might as well have a Snickers bar. Why eat the tomato soup when you can have a Snickers bar? That's my question. I'm like, why was I bothering to eat right? I could just go eat the junk. So, and we've done some reading on this, and I used to work at a food tasting lab at UF, and the people they're getting these 18-year-old kids off the street that probably don't eat that clean, and they're choosing your food. I don't know if you know that, but they're doing taste panels. And like, yeah, I don't like that. It doesn't taste like Doritos, or I don't like that. It doesn't taste like Pepsi. And I'm sitting there watching this going, you're letting them pick our food and tell the food companies, because the food companies hire UF to do this research. And if you're not bringing in a diverse taste panel, you're getting the 18-year-olds, choosing these foods, and they're not going to choose plain tomatoes. I mean, who's going to do that? So it's not getting worse. It's been pretty much the same amount of sugar, but I think that's a lot. And you might have heard this somewhere, I don't know, but they have a difference. See how they have added sugars. So what that means is 4 grams of this 12 was in the tomatoes. Everybody knows tomatoes have some natural sugar. They're a fruit, right? Because they have seeds, fruit of your labors. So, but they added 8 more grams of exogenous sugars. So that means they have to put on a label now that they added outside sugars. And that's been a blessing. If you're looking at labels, it's very helpful to kind of say, wait a second, why did you need to do that? And kind of be, made aware of that at least. So the other quick checkpoint you can do on a food label to, if you're just in a hurry and, or you just don't want to be bothered by reading labels in much detail, is the fiber to total carb ratio. So there's one researcher, and he's an MD, that is very conservative. He says, if you have a chronic illness, if you're on any medication whatsoever for, cholesterol or hypertension or diabetes, you want to do the 5-to-1. Okay, so total carbs to 1 gram of fiber for every 5 of the total carbs. And I'll show you a label in a second. A little bit more lax and a little bit, so if you're healthy and everything's going smooth, you're not on medication, you can get away with 10-to-1. So, and that's the Harvard School of Medicine or Public Health, I think is where that came from. And all those are links. If you ever want to go to these papers, I have them there. Lipids and proteins aren't part of this because they don't typically spike glucose. So they're not going to throw your blood glucose levels, all cattywampus. Lipids absolutely won't. Actually, they inhibit the release of insulin. So you take the total carb grams and divide it by the fiber grams. So here's a food label, and you can see, you can probably do this in your head, just round up to 1 to make it easy. I'm into the significant figure stuff. So dietary fiber 1 gram, total carbohydrate 28. So right away, it's 1 to 28. So that's way higher than 5 or 10. So not something you want to eat. And then another food label, which some of you probably eat and think is healthy, I'm not sure. I think it's an expensive candy bar. But the dietary fiber is 4, and the total carbohydrate, if you're seeing where I'm seeing, is 44. So that's 1 to 11. A little bit closer, but still, this is the real lax kind of ratio. So the one on the left is a Snickers bar, and one on the right is a Cliff bar. So all of those, healthy protein bars that you're spending $2 to $3 each on, just eat the Snickers bar. It's 50 cents. If you want sugar, just eat it. But it's not any better for you health-wise. And that little vitamin junk on the bottom, just take a multivitamin. Save yourself a ton of money. I'm not telling you eat junk, but Cliff bars really aren't it. So yeah, do they meet either criteria? And no, they don't. So here's some other labels. I love this, fruit yogurt. And there's different kinds of fruit yogurt, so I'm not saying it goes across for all of them. Yeah, fruit yogurt on the left and yogurt, nut, and fruit mix on the right. And you can clearly look at these labels and say, how can they put healthy on the outside of these things? But look at the sugars in this thing. 47 grams of sugar and no fiber. So clearly that doesn't meet any of them. And in 1 cup, you got 233 calories. And then over here you have this is like those yogurt covered raisins that you think you're doing something good for you. It's so funny. All it is just tons of calories and sugar. But I used to think that, so I know now. So, but that's a 1 to 17 ratio. So that's not even close to the loosey-goosey kind of ratio. So either of these foods they're just insulin spikers. So not really good to choose. So here's one of I just picked this personally because this is one of my family issues. We all have our family that roll their eyes at you. My brother used to let his daughter just dip pretzels into Nutella. And he's like, no, it's healthy for you. It has nuts in it. I'm like, you're kidding me. And I knew it was sweet because I tasted it once. But then I got the label out and about had a fit. So here's a label for Nutella. I mean, seriously, look at this. 200 calories and 2 tablespoons. Why don't you?
My apologies, accidentally muted.
Did I get it right? Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
I'm back. You're probably like, oh, darn it. I thought she was done. Okay. So Nutella is, if you can see this here, it's kind of cutting me off, but 21 grams of sugar. And this is just 2 tablespoons. I mean, that's like the whole thing is just fat and sugar, and fat and sugar is good. I mean, I like the taste of it. I'm not saying I'm crazy, but it's not actually good for your health. So, but they have hazelnuts, so it must be good. So here is frosting. And you just might as well eat the frosting. And I'm sure frosting is a little bit cheaper than, if you're looking at more groceries for your dollar, frosting is cheaper than the Nutella. But there might be a few more nutrients in the hazelnut. But there's a lot of people that think that Nutella, they actually got in trouble for their advertising, and they got called back. So they had to stop saying that this was a health food. It's like pomegranate juice. It's so funny to see those ads. I just like, you got to be kidding me. Just go mix some sugar and water and add some food coloring. Okay, I hope I'm not spoiling anybody's day because this is probably products you might use. I did this because of Alex, because he likes Starbucks. So he might drink it with just sugar-free stuff. I don't know. We won't even get started in fake sugars because I had to kind of kick that habit. But this is just a Starbucks espresso, and I'm not sure if it was in a can or whatever, but you can see the sugar content. 19 grams of sugar. It's pretty much all the carbohydrate is sugar, and then just, I guess the protein was in the milk. I'm not sure, but and I got alerted to Starbucks because I helped a student get a can out of a vending machine at the college, and it had 450 calories in 1 can of coffee. I was like, why did they do that? That's just so crazy. So here's some oatmeal. So some of you like to have quick things for your kids to grab and, oh, be careful, be careful. This is instant oatmeal with flavors, and I'm sure it's really, really good. But unfortunately, if you come down here and you look at the fiber to the carbohydrate, so that's 1 to 12, right? So that's even above the more loose application of what it means to be a healthy food. And I don't know if any of you eat oatmeal and you eat it naturally, but what I did was I threw in, oh yeah, and that's the other thing. Do you see all the nonsensical claims at the top? Because if it doesn't have high fructose, it's healthy, or artificial preservatives or added colors or artificial, oh, it must be good. It's like, if they have to put those, they're sneaking around. So here is real oatmeal. And you can see there's no sugar. It's hard to compare the two because they have so much sugar and other things added, and they have 1 cup at 48 grams. This is a half a cup at 40 grams. But these are just some wake-up calls to what we would typically say, well, you know, that's what I ate. It's like as a kid, or that's what I know to be healthy. But unless you're actually looking at the label and looking at these ratios, there's a lot of things that can be put in food. I mean, we could go down the line. You could look at even ketchup is like 50% sugar. And all these condiments are full of it. So, and it's just leading to some scary statistics. So what's the fuss about fiber? Why am I going on and on about the fiber to carbohydrate ratio? And this is just I like this Venn diagram because it shows you some people don't understand the difference. You don't have to know the difference between soluble and insoluble. Soluble is typically from pectin and fruit, and then insoluble what you think of like when you eat vegetables. That's the stuff you cannot digest. Insoluble fiber is the food that will go down to your large intestine and feed your microbiome, which is the goal. That is the goal of your food, because then the microbes in your large intestine will feed your cells what they really need. There's so much more work to your digestive system than just eating your food and absorbing it, way more than that. And so I went and got some articles because I knew something was up with this. So they're officially, some of you might know this, they already have rolled this out that they're lowering, I heard 40, but they said 45 now. There's such a rise in young adults having colorectal cancer because we're just not eating the fiber. We're just kind of eating for taste. And I get that. I did it for a long time, but it comes back to get you. And the link takes you to that article. He's a gastroenterologist, and he spoke out about this. And then here is, I think, kind of a telling caption from that article, but just some of the things that we're doing when they ask him, you know, why do you think this is happening? Why are people getting diagnosed with colorectal cancer in the 30s and 40s? And they still are doing research, but some of the links they're clearly seeing are, you know, the sugars, the more sugars, it's in everything, even if you don't think you're eating it, and then taking the fiber out, and then antibiotic use, which I just mentioned briefly at the beginning, and we might have time for that. I'm not sure if we'll have to be the next class. And the decreased physical activity, I guess that depends on the person, but it's more, you can't out exercise a bad diet. So if you're running marathons and you're eating junk, it's going to catch up with you. I've even had to learn painfully in my mid 40s that even if I just walk every day and I eat clean, you're going to be much better off than trying to, you know, pound through 7-minute miles for 5 miles. Sure, you're going to have more mitochondria, but, you know, at my age, that's not really the goal. So you kind of give up that competitive edge. And here's a clip from the American Cancer Society. So they have made this official. So they're just saying the average risk. So you're just a normal plain Jane person, you should have it at 45. And then if you're at risk, it should be under that. And that's just been within the last year or two that they've changed it. So fiber really is one easy way by adding that into your diet to start to avoid some of these things you really would not want to hear as a diagnosis. So looking at the time, almost, I don't know how much time, I think I'm at 40 minutes maybe. These are some things I want to talk about briefly with pictures. I don't just want to have words on here. What does it mean? You know, what some of the different parts of the digestive system. and then also the gut microbiome. That's what I really want to get to, and helping people. I hope some of you have heard some of this, but it's the real change up in research and how doctors are approaching this. So it's interesting content. So here's your digestive system. I tried to find the most kind of weird looking photo I could. You have your esophagus back here, and then it goes into the stomach, and that's where most of your protein is digested through acid, pH of 1. Believe it or not, that's why it hurts when you burp, and some enzymes that can handle that acidity. And then the small intestine, believe it or not, it's not small in length, it's small in diameter. So that's all the part in the middle, and that's where the absorption takes place. So that's your immediate caloric intake. Your starch broke down to glucose, your amino acids, things like that. But what you really want to get through if you're trying to improve your health is you want to get to this large intestine. So here's your little appendix. Hopefully you still have that. And the large intestine is the ascending, transverse, and descending. That is where all the microbes live. I forget what the statistics are. It's like 100 times more genes of different species of microbes in your large intestine than you are human. It's exponential. It's like trying to understand the national debt. I don't understand. But the number of microbes and hopefully the diversity, depending if you eat a lot of different plants. So the goal from this one physician, and I try to do this, 12 different plants a day. And with the American diet, that's really, really tough because the SAD, the standard American diet, is like 4 if you're pushing it. So, and you can be a very unhealthy vegan just by eating fries and soda. So those are plants, but we're talking about plants that provide fiber and a lot of genetics that can then go in and feed your gut microbiome. But the thing is here that the actual digestive system doesn't necessarily digest. It's the enzymes that come out of your pancreas. I don't know if you know this, but your pancreas is making the chemicals that break down your food. Your tube is just a tube within your body that goes through and will be the housing for that, and then the absorption into your blood system. 27-ish, right? 27-ish feet and multiple different cell types for your digestive system. And this is just to look at where the important parts are. So you might have known what the macroscopic look like, but these little microvilli, so you have the villi, and then you break those down all the way down to microvilli. It looks like felt, but this increases the surface area of your digestive system to be the size of a tennis court. I mean, our lungs, all the alveoli in our lungs, the microvilli in our intestine, the nephrons in our kidney, it's just, we're so amazingly designed. It's just boggling how big you would have to be if these structures weren't as they are in your body to carry out these chemical reactions. It's so crazy. It's great. So just some things to think about, like you probably experienced this, just smelling food or seeing food or hearing about food. That starts the actual digestive process. You can get all the gastric juices going just by thinking about food. And there is a lot of research into that. The surface area, which I told you how greatly large it is because of these microvilli, the enzymes digest, the small intestine absorbs. And this is just where they're finding this out now, that you probably know what serotonin is. It's a very important neurotransmitter, especially for delaying gratification. Now they're finding within the last year that dopamine is also made in abundance by your microbes in your large intestine. All this does is make me have more questions than answers, because if that's the case and you take antibiotics, why aren't you chronically depressed? But I'm sure the brain kicks in and takes over that system, but I'm not purporting to be an expert on this. I'm just, every time I look into this, I'm just amazed by all this. It's so incredible. This looks like a very sciencey, technical slide, but really it's how your macros work. It's how they interact with your liver. Your liver is amazing. Everybody thinks, oh, well, the liver, you know, it gets cirrhosis if people drink. It's like, no, your liver is your best friend. It takes all these molecules and can change them. It's an alchemist, if you will. And so I just kind of pointed some things out on here. So the macros, you can see them, the glycogen at the top, you can see the triglycerides bottom right, and the protein. And then these kind of swap around through these metabolic pathways, and glucose is the one we're kind of looking at. So you can see glucose in different areas One fate of it is it becomes acetyl-CoA and ATP. You might have heard of that. The mitochondria make ATP, powerhouse of the cell. It also can go right to the muscles, like I said, just be taken in, just taken in by the muscle cells without insulin. It's pretty incredible. And then also it goes right to the brain, and fatty acids is another end point. So it can go to a lot of different places. You see the ketogenesis, and some of you probably have heard of the keto diet. That's when you deprive yourself of carbs and you only eat fats, and you force your brain and your cells to work off of ketones. It's a really interesting thing. If you haven't done it, you should just try it, to go through entering into ketosis, because you feel it. It's crazy. You feel that switch. You feel kind of wonky, and then it takes over, but your brain doesn't mind. I mean, it functions very smoothly on ketones. Ketones are these little molecules on the ends of fat. So what that means is when they break off, you can measure those, and you can actually smell it in your breath and out your skin. But that shows that you're burning fat now, and you're not burning carbohydrates. So it can have a lot of health benefits to it. And this is the dual fuel tank I was talking about. So you're either burning carbohydrates or fat. This is the whole keto diet thing. So if you can keep the carbohydrates out of your diet and just work off of ketones and fat, then you can just pull from your stores and keep burning your fat. Problem is, some keto dieters eat so much fat that they're not losing any fat. It can be problematic if you don't know what you're doing. But if you watch this diagram, you'll see the little lever here go up as people eat their starches, and the valve switches, because you cannot use both carbohydrate and fat at the same time. So as you increase your carbs, you see more and more carbs up here in the top left. The valve starts, I love that candy lollipops and stuff. The valve will start switching, and then you'll start using the carbohydrate for fuel, and the fat shuts off. Now here's where it gets problematic. Once you get to a certain level, and this is the issue in our diets, we eat so many simple carbs or starches without fiber. We not only are burning only carbohydrate, we're not using any of our fat, we're never draining our liver of glycogen, and it goes right into lipogenesis. I don't know if you can see that. Once you remember that liver diagram, you get too much glucose, it just starts storing fat. The glucose and the excess carbohydrates go right back into your fat cells. And that can add to metabolic syndrome and a host of other physiological issues. So this kind of, maybe a little bit, I could give more if I had more time, explanation on the keto angle and some of these other diets that people are on. And there's a lot of legitimacy to it. The problem is with some of these fad diets, as long as you understand you're on them for a short period of time, and then you have to transition into a healthy lifestyle. If they're great to get you going, that's great, use them, but you got to get a healthy lifestyle of normal dietary intake. It's not good to stay on those for super long term. So, and this is the gut microbiome. And I just threw this list up. It seems kind of overwhelming at first, but we don't really take in what our large intestine and the microbes in it are doing for us. And all of these arrows point to some kind of research that has been done, that if we wipe out the microbiome, these are issues that can arise. And they've linked them to specific bacteria and viruses. And not only these, but other really weird, unknown autoimmune disorders, because the pathogenic bacteria leak out of the large intestine attached to important organs in your peritoneal cavity, in your gut cavity. And then your immune system's like, it goes and gets them, and your organs are collateral damage. And it's problematic. So they call it the gut-brain axis, because there's a whole enteric nervous system in here that talks to your brain, and it's going back and forth and releasing, upgrading neurotransmitters, downgrading neurotransmitters. So it really, they even saw that it controls, the microbiome controls peristalsis, which is gut motility. It's just amazing. And that was a group at Penn State, I think, figured that out. That was so amazing how they did that research. But not only the liver, but your microbiome will metabolize drugs and makes other nutrients, vitamins, all these. This is the short chain fatty acids, vitamins, amino acids, hormones. This is one reason as an aging female that you got to be really careful about the sugar intake, because sugar is regulated by insulin. Insulin's an endocrine system molecule. And so as menopause starts kicking in, that just, they have a party and they don't invite you. You don't even know what's going on. And then if you drink anything, even a couple glasses of wine, which isn't considered like a big deal, that's a fat soluble molecule too. And then that just adds more to the party. So I've had to learn all this the hard way. And then it also maintains the healthy layer of mucosal lining so that these bacteria can't get out and get into your peritoneal cavity. So there's so much to this. So you want to feed these microbes and keep them happy and healthy. And the only way to do that is fiber from plants. And this is just a more complex diagram just to kind of show you what's going on. This is the inside of the gut lumen. This blue area is the mucosal lining, right? And this is the actual gut lining. And then you have Peyer's patches. That's a fancy thing for your immune system. It's a lymphatic area where the white blood cells can interact, because if some of the bacteria in your large intestine gets out, you can die in 2 hours. Some of it is that pathogenic. But this is just showing you M cells are just mucosal cells, and then antimicrobial peptides to help with infections and things like that. But they're just showing you that the structure of this and what all is playing a role. And if the microbes do get out, it's showing you a pathway here that they have free reign of everything below your diaphragm. And that can be an issue. And is, as you can see in this, I took a clip from the paper that this came from, and all the different diseases that they're linking this to. I've even had a student in my nutrition class that said she was diagnosed with celiac. She cleaned up her diet during the nutrition class, and she says, I don't really have the symptoms anymore. And I thought that was kind of crazy, because they're saying that a lot of this is just self-inflicted through our poor food supply. So I'm not an expert in this, but I just kind of read and take it all in and try to pass it on. But the key word there is microbiota dysbiosis. Sounds so fancy schmancy, but it just means your large intestine is really unhealthy, to put it mildly. So
this is, sorry to interrupt. This is great.
We're going over on time, aren't we?
You know, we're right about the 1 hour, because you started about 5 after. So this is amazing. Thank you so much. I know folks are going to have questions, and obviously we're going to have to wait for next week to ask those. But just wanted to give you a kind of a little bit of a wrap-up warning.
No, that's great. I was just going to look over because my timer started beforehand, and I know I get talking, so I appreciate you doing that, Alex. What I'll do then is I'll just stop this for questions, because I don't have a lot of material for next week other than some of the simple hacks that you can do to kind of get through this. So, and try to make some changes in your family. So if you guys have questions, I'm game.
We're right at 5 after, so I think it may be a burning question or two for folks, but let's do remember that we can come back on. And Leann, I think that just kind of following up with questions probably will take us the rest of the next time we're together. So, but thank you so much. But
sure.
One or two
there's something really wrong with your microphone, Alex, and it's really annoying.
Thanks for letting me know.
I thought it would clear up. I thought it would just, straighten itself out, but you sounded good just then.
Is there a question?
That's better. Okay, yeah. So I'm good to just hold off until next week, and I'm sorry I wasn't keeping a note on the time.
No, you're good. You're good. I just appreciate you all this you're sharing with us. So, and just so you know, all I drink at Starbucks is coffee. I don't drink all that fancy stuff. So don't throw me in that category.
I feel better now. I'm really glad.
Well, let me just, as we stop tonight, and again, Leann will start back next week, and we can start with a lot of questions that you're having. Let me just close us quickly with this collect on the joy of God's creation. Oh, Heavenly Father, you have filled the world with beauty Open our eyes to behold your gracious hand in all your works. And I would include the human body in that. That rejoicing in your whole creation, we may learn to serve you with gladness for the sake of him through whom all things were made, your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Leann, thank you so much. And we'll pick up with Q&A when we come back together next week.
Yeah,
Thanks,
great.
Leann.
Thank
Thanks, Leann.
you so much, guys.
Thanks, Leann.
All right.